Hey guys, what's up? It's Schla coming back to ya with another episode of Car Rides with Schla. And I did not get the best night's sleep last night. It just wasn't the best that it could have been. Sadly. And I did have I actually know I remember what I was going to bring up. There's kind of been this trend with me throughout my life where I've really had a hard time accepting loss. You know, typically in a person's life, they encounter things at a relatively young age where that is not what I meant to do. Anyways, I just hit some button on my car. I didn't even know what was going on. At least it wasn't anything crazy. Anyways. What was. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times loss, when somebody's a child, they have some kind of loss, and that changes them. It ends up having an effect on them. It ends up teaching them that valuable lesson. And in my case, it was just something I don't think I ever really got over. And I think as I live through life and have lived through life, loss and loss aversion has been a theme that I've had for all of my life. I don't really think I ever grew out of it. If you think about why it's difficult for me to do some things, it kind of boils down to that. You know, when it was applying for a job, I think what scares me most is the fact that nowadays, well, this is before I had a job. What scared me most was not the job itself. It was the hiring process, the uncertainty that surrounds it, the substantial loss of time that would occur from me applying to places and not getting in. And still, the one place I applied to, because I did try to get a different job before I got this job, they just never got back to me. And I still remember that. I don't think about it too much, but I definitely remember it. And I was not happy about it. And it makes me sound spoiled, obviously, because I have the job that I have now, and it's been consistent work for over 2 years. And that's something I definitely should be grateful about. Most people are not going to have as remotely smooth of a work experience as I have had. You know, I just can't really complain. But to highlight this idea that loss and lost time in particular, lost time with no reward, these are things that I'm incredibly sensitive to, that I think most people just kind of roll over because that's basically their whole lives. I think a lot of people, whether in their public life, in their private life, they end up losing a lot of time. They end up having lots of inefficiencies surrounding time. People don't live that efficiently in their actual lives. When they work, they don't live very efficiently. In their pleasure lives, when they usually just fool around and play games and such, they don't really care about optimization that much. They don't really focus too much on loss. And in the world we live in, it's kind of engineered into us to just get over it. Because, especially with how things are financially now, most people are never going to get to a point where they really have much anyways. And so most people, in addition to that, the digital is so enticing. Most people just gravitate to the digital, to the temporary. They don't end up doing much more. Because it's bright, it's stimulating. Oftentimes it's free, but other times it's costly. And, in that case, you're turning material into air, basically, because you're just paying for skins in a game or paying for games that I don't really get it. I've talked about this concept before about why are there so many games? Why do so many people get bored? It's almost like video games, because you don't find that with sports. I guess you do in some ways, but people weren't like playing basketball. Oh, I'm bored of this. Let me play hockey. Oh, I'm bored of this. Let me play baseball. Oh, I'm tired of this. Let's try football now. Did people ever do that? I don't really think so. I think usually with sports, physical sports, people didn't do that. Like, I mean, sure, you could have maybe been interested in bowling for a period of time, or you could have, I'm trying to think, like bowling or maybe golf. But like, it's not like you just get into these things and then get bored of them and then have another thing and then another. Like, this is what tends to happen with video games. And I think it's just because video games are easier to get in and out of. You don't really have to do anything. You just have to install a new game. It's quick, it's fast, it's easy. You don't really have to make any commitment. If you were to get into a new sport, that's a whole bunch of new physical equipment. Where are you going to put it? Now, if you want to get into golf, now you need a whole thing to have a bunch of golf clubs in. That doesn't make any sense. What if you don't have the garage space to store it? What if you don't have, But for a game, you're alleviated of that consequence. You can just embrace and engage in novelty to your heart's content. And I feel like that's probably why it happens. Because it's even more streamlined than the days when you had to change games. Even the fact that when I played the DS, you had to physically take a cartridge in and out. It made it so that you really could not do that whole novelty thing. Just wasn't possible. It wasn't realistic. You didn't feel like popping that cartridge in and out a million times. It's not very satisfying. But I think swiping between a million different apps is like very appealing to the brain. But yeah, like taking a disc out in and out 5 times is not appealing. It doesn't appeal to the brain at all. So yeah, there's been a change. There's been a change for sure. Now, where was I getting at with all that? Like it was an inch. Oh yeah, loss. I guess people, you kind of, if you're not really as aware of it, you can. I think people are aware of it for periods of time, but I think overall you can kind of dissociate and not really be cognizant of the losses that have accrued. You know, it's like pretty easy to just noise yourself out and just not really deal with that stuff. You don't really have to be accountable for being a bored and deranged animal that plays 15 different games but doesn't really know how to play any of them. There's no that was pretty judgmental. There's no consequence to that. You can do that, and if anything, that probably would lead to even more of this confused dissociative state. We want to do everything nowadays. You know, everybody wants to get in on everything. Everything's so accessible. It's more accessible than anything ever has been before. Nothing else has really been all that. There's really hasn't been a time for all of humanity. Everything's been very restricted. You didn't really have the choice to do this or that. Not everybody could just be a musician. Now pretty much anybody can. The music that's being generated, it's still takes talent, still takes a certain ear, a certain skill to mix everything properly. But it's not taking the same degree or skill as back when actual instruments were played, and especially now with AI coming into the picture, that talent is going to be further diminished. But we try to do everything. We have ideas to do everything, and the choice becomes too much. We have to remember that for most of humanity, you didn't have a choice in anything. You probably would just end up doing whatever your parent did. And that would be it. You didn't really have much of a choice or a say or a decision in things, even down to marriages. There were very long stretches of time where arranged marriages were the norm. The concept of freedom is novel if you look at things historically, and even now, while the percentage has grown, although it arguably is shrinking, the group of people that could really identify as free. It probably peaked at some point in the late 1900s. But this idea, it's something that we took for granted. I think a lot of people thought it would always be. And people have had not much of a concept for the subversion that's occurred. How much we've lost, how much we've fallen from grace over the past few decades. Just in a few decades, so much has changed, so much has fallen or faltered. And I think people really have no bearing on a lot of things. They see what's in front of them. They know what's in front of them. A lot of these ideas about society or systems, they're too abstract. People don't really understand how it works properly. It's more appealing to invest in fictional media. It's more appealing to be more socially cohesive, as that's what everybody else does. So if I really started digging into stuff, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. And nobody really wants to stick out. Nobody wants that. Some people claim they do, but their antisocial rebellion only has any value because you have a coherent monoculture to rebel against. In this day and age, I'm not really sure how valuable it is to be rebelling. It's almost like attempting to build or rebuild a monoculture would actually be more rebellious than to continue down the path of senseless individuality. It's this senseless individuality that defines the modern era. Individuality to a point where it doesn't make sense, to where we're not being individuals with a positive force, but rather to unravel ourselves further. This oftentimes is manifesting in the darker sides of humans. Whatever appeals to the animal in us. We're not the higher power. Which is why I like that distinction, whether you can argue about what it means scientifically, the idea that humans are not fully animal and that we are partly of a higher power, half God, half man. Well, not half man. Man would be half God, half animal. That interpretation to me, ever since I heard it, it resonated. It made a lot of sense. And I don't have to get into the science behind it. It's not really relevant for the allegory or like the concept. The concept conceptually, I think, holds a lot of coherence. You know, in comparison to other animals, we do have a greater autonomy. We see it. Not in all of us, but in some of us, there are pretty exceptional things that end up coming into fruition. And it proves that there's a different potential to humans. There's a different potential to humans than there are animals. The things that we're able to build, the things that we're able to do have been very impressive, even if they've resulted in our own enslavement. And even if there's vast inefficiencies, in a way it should be considered godlike. I think if you took a prehistoric human and showed them society now, it would feel like they're in another dimension entirely. And if you really think about it, we are. I mean, the lives we live primarily with the assistance of technology and just modern amenities, they create a utopia in a lot of ways. Now, we don't notice it all the time because the bad stuff tends to be remembered louder in our minds. But the idea that we have a phone where we can watch anything we want anytime, we have cars that allow us to transport ourselves across very long distances, and then modern cars, it's pretty lavish and comfortable at the same time. It's very impressive. It's like living in a different world. It's really not the same world as it once was. Something I always remember, I changed when I became a teenager. I've said this before. I kind of transitioned away from video games so much and shifted my focus to music. And I remember getting very into music. I kind of liked it more than video games. Now, I've had some arguments about that. I kind of think in a way it hampered my brain. It probably changed my brain. And in some ways, I kind of regret not being a gamer for longer, because being a gamer, I felt like I was using my brain more. And I've always had kind of a guilt about video games. Maybe I get that from my dad, because my dad never liked them, never really liked that stuff. And he also was always into music. But I think in general, I don't know if it's just my dad. I think it is just not it really is not my favorite thing to do. It was just what I was doing. It wasn't really where I wanted to be. Like, I'm definitely happier doing this podcast, recording, listening to somebody talk, listening to things, than I am playing a game. I'd probably choose that over a game pretty much any time. I just don't, it's just not really my thing, And communication, I think it probably always was my thing. It's just that back then, what could you do about it? The internet was not how it is, so you couldn't really socialize in the same way. I kind of just played video games and was into video games because they were the most stimulating thing, but I didn't think they really fit me as a person. And honestly, I don't really believe that anybody... Like, I still have a theory, not with everybody. I think with a lot of people, though, they're not real gamers. They're people who use video games as a crutch because they haven't discovered their true meaningful hobby yet. And I guess it's possible some people don't have that. Some people probably just can't really prioritize something better to do. And so, at least in modernity, they can just kind of play a video game. But I don't know. I kind of think past a certain point, it is a crutch. I think it's a crutch for a lot of people. And that's just kind of how it happens. I think a lot of people who play games, I don't know that it's really making them happy. It's just something to do. It's something that's fun, but oftentimes it's fun, but it generates anger. And the entertainment value is based on anger. And that's not really making, like, anger should be reserved for very important situations, scenarios, people. And it's probably better for the body to not be angry. But people don't even zoom out and think like that. We basically torture ourselves for pleasure, just to get pleasure, just to do these things. But I think in my case, I guess it's possible it's more of a special case where, you know, I played games, I liked them, but then I kind of found out that I really like listening to things more, and that games were not, they just weren't my thing. Like I'd probably rather, because I'm thinking, like, if I had a self-driving car, would I rather do this or play a video game while driving? It would probably be do this. And a lot of people, that wouldn't be their answer. Most people would just easily pick a video game. I just think, I guess here's my way to organize this thing. I'm trying to explain. Playing a video game is just such an easy thing to do, and it's an easy thing to continue doing, and it's louder than a lot of other activities. So I think it keeps some people away from their true self. And obviously TikTok is an even larger manifestation of this, where it's a lot of idle time, it's a lot of distracting time, and it just, you're not really gaining from it. You're not really getting anywhere from it. You're not discovering who you are. You're not thinking about who you are and why are we here? Who put us here? These higher questions. I guess it sort of goes without saying that you would think that we're just here materially, you know, that there isn't a higher power and we don't really have souls, and it's just, you know, a bunch of flesh. But either way, I mean, even if we don't have souls, it's an omission of character too, because I think subconsciously when you choose to do these things, you're acting in a state of unconsciousness. You're acting in a state of sleep. And like I said, it really depends. There are a minority percentage of people who play a game, but they're putting effort into it. They're learning the ropes. They don't bounce around 50 games. They don't just play whatever's trending. They get specifically skilled at a certain thing. And that's different. Sometimes these people go on to have professional careers because of how good they are at a game. I don't really see how that's a huge problem. But I just think for humanity's sake. But the whole argument is, would these people be doing anything else anyway? Like, obviously, in my case, because I want to talk and I want to talk about these kind of things, it's a bit of an unfair advantage, because this is just my desire, and other people's desire would not look like this. Other people just wouldn't want to do it. So I guess video games are also kind of, and you know what? I shouldn't even be saying video game over. Like, I should really be saying like anything that is idle screen time, because it includes like just passive social media use as well. And if anything, we've clarified, I always get hooked on video games, but it's very true. Passive social media use is worse. I'm sure it's worse, especially if the feed is not non-fictional in nature or very explorative. If it's just about funniness, then that's not. So there's levels to it. But again, I just think people would be doing different things. But the argument, the point is with some people, if they were born 100 or 200 years ago, what would they do? Would they just do the path of least resistance that was available to them then? Are we always just going to be subject to these things? Subject to, if instant gratification is possible, if it's an option, we just end up slipping into it? And is it better for people to have video games as an outlet? Because what would they be doing otherwise? Not everybody is meant to be creative, to generate things. At least I don't think so. I guess you could make an argument that all of us have some kind of a creative spark within us, but I think that risks being a bit naive of a perspective, as hopeful as it is, as positive sounding as it sounds. The realisticness of it is shaky. So I'm not sure. I'm not really sure where this takes us, because in some ways the silliness of modernity, it gives purpose to humans which otherwise may not have any. Video games are fundamentally a brighter, a friendlier, a nicer use of time than just kind of having nothing to do. Well, see, and that's the thing, though, and I've made this argument before. In a physical sense, in a biological sense, a video game or social media, it's stronger, it's more addictive, it's producing more dopamine. But if these same people have ended up socializing instead, maybe it's more serotonin. You see what I mean? There's a lot of people where they may have some moderately shy tendencies, some somewhat shy tendencies. And that gets encouraged in this world because we have that option, that fantasy, that ability to just tap out. We have that option to escape from what's in front of us more so than ever before. It used to be daydreaming, but now it's material dreaming. You have a device that can dream for you. And with AI on the horizon, a lot of these things I talk about will only become more and more prevalent and obvious. Now I feel like daydreaming would be seen as some kind of a creative avenue. Whereas before that was maybe seen as unproductive. But as someone who's a true daydreamer, somebody who keeps their headphones out, keeps the screen away, and daydreams. Isn't that pretty special? That's pretty unusual nowadays. In the past, people wanted to cut that out. People wanted to make you a good worker, wanted you to pay attention in school, stop daydreaming. A lot of these kind of ideas came about. We made good time today. Okay. Oh my gosh. We made good time today. Well, I'd say that was a fairly productive episode. Still feels like that kind of vibe I was talking about where I don't know that I'm being as coherent or concrete. I mean, who knows if that even matters, but it just kind of feels like I'm not really being that coherent or concrete. But I felt a little more coherent today. And less pausing, which we always like to see. So, yeah, I'm not really sure what else there is to interject as I'm getting my things together. Other than the obvious. The obvious that it has been schla, and now it's time to buy schla. So, see ya schla.